Welcome to At the Forefront, where we explore the groundbreaking innovations and developments shaping the future of aging. We're hitting the road to showcase how older adults are embracing change, staying active, and thriving in their golden years. Here's your host, CEO of Forefront Living, Tim Mallett.
We're eager to share for the first time 3 special segments with Major John Lucky Luckadoo. Segment 2 focuses on leadership and how Lucky earned his position as well as a respect from his fellow comrades.
Well, it happened under rather awkward circumstances. We had to fly from Bangor, Maine to Gander Lake, Newfoundland to make the big hop across the North Atlantic to Scotland, about a 13-hour flight, which we had to have extra fuel for and all of this sort of thing. In Gander Lake, we were told that we would not make the flight, be able to make the flight, unless we had a favorable tailwind to help us. That we would be so heavy upon takeoff that we would barely skim the whitecaps on the ocean and we'd have to burn off fuel and gradually climb up, and it would be a very close and difficult task to be able to complete it. While we were waiting for the favorable tailwind, the pilot that I was assigned to and my crew took it upon himself to go across the base and shack up with a WAF, whereupon he contracted a virulent case of VD and was immediately thrown in the hospital. And so the rest of the group took advantage of the favorable tailwinds and proceeded to go to England and the war. We sat there for 2 weeks waiting for him to recuperate. In those days, the only thing that they had to treat venereal disease with was sulfa, which was very debilitating, and it left him so weak that when he was finally released, that he couldn't even stand up. So we had to load him into the airplane. And up until that point, I'd had a very difficult life with the crew, particularly the navigator and the bombardier, who were the only 2 other officers on the crew. And they made my life just sheer hell because they didn't think I was qualified to be second in command of the group, of the crew, and certainly not to fly the airplane. So I called them together and I said, now look, you guys have made life hell for me. I'm going to have to get us to combat. But the navigator in particular had been the instigator of all of the tricks they tried to pull on me, and he was the worst. So I pointed to him and said, Tim, you're going to have to make landfall in Scotland on the nose, or else I'm going to personally throw your butt out of the airplane without a parachute. Well, that did change the dynamics of our relationship. I said, you're going to have to depend on me to fly the airplane and to get us there, but I'm going to depend on you to navigate us and to make sure that we get where we're supposed to be. So that cleared the air to an extent. Upon arrival in England, first in Scotland and then we went to a base in England, the pilot was so embarrassed about his behavior that he vowed that he would fly the fastest tour of anybody and complete his tour and get back to rotated back to the States. He did. He flew, and most of the rest of the crew actually completed the first tour, crew to finish a tour in the 100th Bomb Group in 91 days, which was unheard of and was impossible. It couldn't happen, but it did. And he was lucky enough to do that. We had a rule that if the crew was the lead crew in the formation, that the co-pilot would be replaced by a command pilot, and the co-pilot would go back and fly in the tail gun position. So we were designated as a lead crew, and they did require me to go back and fly in the tail, which I had no training for whatsoever. I'd never fired a 50 caliber machine gun in my life, and here I was supposed to be the fire control officer for the whole formation by flying in the tail gun position. Well, it was so bitterly cold when we got to altitude, 50 to 60 degrees below zero, and I got so involved when we got attacked that I just bore down on the triggers and burned both barrels out of the twin 50s. So I was totally useless. I was sitting there without anything to shoot with and could only communicate with the pilot over the intercom. And when I got back, survived that mission, I said, I'm not doing that anymore. I don't care whether you court-martial me or what, but I wasn't trained to be that. I was trained to fly the airplane. So you can have my wings, or you can court-martial me, or transfer me, or do whatever, but I'm not flying in the tail. So as a result, I sat on the ground while they continued to fly, and that's how they continued their tour, all except one gunner on the crew. 8 of them completed the tour, and they were rotated back to the States, and then I was checked out as a first pilot and became an operations officer with other duties, and flew with other crews, and eventually completed my tour. Well, fear is a personal thing. Varies, of course, from person to person and circumstance to circumstance. I can only, and it's difficult to describe or to give you any, to convey to you any real feeling of what I experienced. You're almost scared, speechless, when you really are confronted with enemy aircraft bearing in on you with their guns flashing, and you see their bullets flashing by you. The flak, the anti-aircraft defenses were thrown up in mass box formations to really create horrendous damage, because once those shells explode, they throw shrapnel 150 to 200 feet around the explosion. So there's very little, if anything, you can do to take evasive action or to avoid that. But you can see it bursting in front of you. And this can cause horrendous fear. You realize that you've got to continue to fly the airplane. You have to maintain formation. You have to make sure that all of the parts of the airplane are functioning properly. Or if you're sustaining any damage, that you cope with that and feather an engine, or see that any of the wounded on board are taken care of, and all of that sort of thing. So you're really so busy, you're so involved, you're so intent on what you're doing that you can't allow the fear to overcome or to really take hold. Again, it's a purely individual thing. How you do that, and I don't know, but you just do it because you have to. You don't survive unless you do. Consequently, you learn to live with it. And you have to put it aside, or you have to say, well, I've got to, if I concentrate on this, why, the fear will take care of itself. Maybe it does, and maybe it doesn't. But that's what you have to continue to teach yourself, school yourself to do. And it's like when you get back from a raid and you've had a horrendous experience. It was so horrendous in some cases that it would turn your hair white in one mission. So you come back white-headed. That's what fear can do to you. Or you have a streak of white or a blotch of white in your head. As a 20-year-old or 21-year-old, that looks pretty strange, but that happened. Some people fail to be able to overcome that, fail to be able to school themselves to withstand it. And as a result, they quit. They say, I'm not doing this anymore. They're out to kill me, and I'm not going to die that way. So we have to immediately get them off the base, because the morale of the rest of the crew would be so, rest of the group would be so adversely affected that we can't allow that to be, they'd say, why do I have to do it and you don't? It's not that easy. It's not that simple. So consequently, they go to the infantry or they're discharged dishonorably or whatever. But handling fear is, I don't know how I can possibly describe it. It's something that you are very apprehensive about, of course. It has varying effects upon each individual of various degrees. There are different kinds of fear. You pray a lot. You become very, very superstitious about doing certain things in a certain way in order to survive because it worked last time. You think it'll perhaps work again. So all of these things, of course, come into play as a young person attempts to cope with the tremendous amount of fear that is thrown at them. Well, I don't know that you didn't have the authority. If you were in the position of the leader of the crew, as the pilot was, as the airplane commander, your decisions are what makes the difference between whether you survive or you don't, and whether the 9 other crewmen on the crew survive. So you're very careful about the decisions you make and how you make them. You are thrust in the position of having to make them. You can't equivocate. You have to decide, and you have to decide for them as well as yourself. And so, yes, it's a tremendous responsibility, and it's something that you will be accountable for when you get back on the ground if you made the wrong decision. For example, if you're leading the formation and you go over the target and for one reason or another, maybe your bombs hang up in the bomb bay or something, and you don't drop your bombs, and you decide to take the whole formation around and go over the target again, that can be fatal. That can be, because by then all of the anti-aircraft defenses have got your exact altitude and direction, and your chances of surviving that are extremely thin. And they don't advise that to ever happen. It did happen, and it does happen. And that is a decision that someone could make who could be held accountable, because they could lose the whole formation because of some commander's decision that, well, we're going to make another pass at the target.